Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you find this content helpful. So today we're going to be talking about the second book of Maccabees. And we have just been covering the first book of Maccabees in the last few weeks. And today, let's see here. All right, the second book of Maccabees. I'll give you a brief introduction into this book. I'm not going to read everything on the screen here, but I'll point out some two items that are bolded here. The first is that in the second book of Maccabees, you see an opposition between Ubuntu or Isolele's way of life and Hellenism. And I will talk about what Hellenism is. Hellenism is pretty much a religious context that refers to modern pluralistic religions that were practiced in Greece. In essence, in Hellenism, they centered on the worship of 12 Hellenic deities. Some of those deities include Zeus and a few others that we can talk about later. But those were the ones called the Hellenistic pantheon or the Greek pantheon, Zeus, Poseidon, and so on and so forth. So there's a contrast here between Isolele, who worship one Tatanzambi, and the Greeks, who are worshiping at least 12. They call them the 12 Olympians, but the Olympian term had nothing to do with Olympics. It had everything to do with they lived around Mount Olympus. So now we have a clash of Hellenism and Ubuntu. And Second Maccabees condemns those Bantus, those Isolele, who adopt these values of Hellenism, even if they're trying to remain loyal to Tatanzambi. So today, I'm giving you a summary here of what I consider to be a breakdown of the different themes that I saw. But we're not going to go through all of them. We're just going to cover the ones that I've highlighted in red. So we're going to review those two letters to the Bantu community in Egypt, or to Isolele. Note that those people are in Egypt, right? How did they end up back in Egypt? Because they left Egypt with Moses. And then we're going to talk about martyrdom. We'll see a story of a woman and her 7 sons and what happens to them. But I prepared a summary of the entire book of Second Maccabees, and I've got it in audio, and so I'm going to play it. Before I play it, let me just mention, grab a piece of paper and a pen and just make some bullet points of anything that catches your attention, even in this overview that's going to play in the audio. All right, let's listen to it.
The second book of Maccabees does not continue the narrative of First Maccabees as might be expected, but instead presents an alternate account that begins with events that precede the key events of First Maccabees. It also ends at an earlier point, essentially covering events that occurred in Judea between 180 and 161 BC. The author includes a curious explanation of his writing in chapter 2, verses 19 to 32, claiming this book is actually an abridgment of a 5-volume history, never yet discovered, by Jason of Cyrene. As such, Second Maccabees may be one of the earliest examples of book condensation. Both that lengthy work and this condensation were written in Greek at some point after 110 BC. Even though this book is less historically reliable than First Maccabees, several features make it of great interest. First is its discussion of martyrdom and its meaning. This is of keen interest to the author, and readers can see in this account the origins of the veneration of martyrs that would later become so prominent in religious circles during times of persecution. Secondly, a definite belief in resurrection emerges in this book in the context of the untimely and unjust deaths of the various Maccabean heroes under tyrannical persecution. The hope and expectation of being raised to everlasting life after dying is seen as a divine act of grace that God extends to those who have died for the sake of the law. By the time of Christ, this emerging theological development had become a tenet of belief among the more progressive Pharisees, but was resisted as a novelty by the conservative Sadducees. This is also evident in Matthew chapter 22, verses 23 to 33. Apart from the essential story itself, one important feature that these very different books have in common is their depiction of an indomitable Bantu spirit continually welling up and contending for religious freedom. We see in both 1st and 2nd Maccabees a fierce loyalty to God, and it is this spirit and loyalty that has enabled Bantus to survive centuries of massive oppression and yet to thrive against all odds in living out the ancient calling to be a light to the Gentiles. See Isaiah chapter 49 verse 6 for more details. The Maccabean era was a pivotal time in their history, the time in which the modern nation of the children of Jacob was beginning to emerge. It was a period of rich self-expression, as evidenced in the broad range of literature being authored and translated by Bantus in Jerusalem, Alexandria, and throughout the diaspora, some of which, through vigorous debate, was determined to be canonical scriptures, i.e., the law and the prophets. And it was from within this rich cultural milieu that one Galilean teacher, Yesaiah of Nazareth, would embark on a ministry of preaching and reconciliation.
All right, so now let's get a little bit in some details of some highlights that I made from these two letters to the Bantu community in Egypt. So first of all, right there at the beginning of this second book of Maccabees, it says the kindred. That means the relatives, or the family members, or the people who are related by blood of the Bantus that are in Jerusalem. That's who this is addressed to. That is who are writing this letter. And those who are in the country of Judea, they send greetings to their relatives or their fellow Bantus who are throughout Egypt and wish them good peace. They talk about a lot of things, but notice what they emphasize. See that you keep the day of the Feast of Tabernacles, right? And they're writing this letter, and they also mention King Ptolemy's teacher, who is also from the stock of the anointed priests. That's the Levites. So why is a teacher of Ptolemy actually a high priest? A Levite. These Egyptians, or Ptolemy and his people, they knew who we were, and they wanted the best of us. Moving on, in the same chapter, we see an emphasis here, to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And then there's an episode here about they're being reminded to keep a memorial of the fire which was given when Nehemiah offered sacrifices. Very interesting things happened to this fire. This is after he had built both the temple and the altar. This happened when they had been led, or their forefathers had been led, into the land of Persia. Now, today when you hear that word Persia, you might be thinking what they call the so-called Middle East. I beg to differ. I think it's somewhere else, and actually in Africa. But anyway, the godly priests of that time took of the fire of the altar and hid it privately in the hollow of a well that was without water, right? What happened? After many years, this was unknown to men where that fire had been hidden. After many years, when it pleased God, Nehemiah, having received a charge from the king of Persia, requested some people to go and look for that fire from some people from the descendants of the priests that had hidden it. So that information was kept and passed on amongst those priests and their descendants. And then when they declared that they had found no fire, but they only found thick water. They didn't find the fire that they were looking for, but they found thick water. What happens here is Nehemiah commanded the priest to sprinkle with the water. They didn't find fire, they found water, thick water. And he told them to sprinkle the wood and the things that had been put together on some kind of altar with that water. And when it was done and some time had passed, the sun shone out, which before had been hidden by the clouds. And when the sun shone out, a great blaze was kindled, and everybody marveled. Can you imagine just pouring water, some thick water, onto wood and other items, probably animals of sacrifice? And as the sun shines, a fire is kindled. Amazing, amazing. Okay, let's see what else happens here. In the next chapter, it talks about a prayer that they offered. I think this is a prayer that we should adopt as Bantus, or at least the themes that are in this prayer. O Lord God, the creator of all things, who are terrible and strong and righteous and merciful, who alone are clean and gracious, who alone supplies every need, who alone are righteous and almighty and eternal, you that save Isolele out of all evil, who made the fathers your chosen and did sanctify them. Accept the sacrifice of all your people, Isolele, and guard your own portion and consecrate it. Gather together our dispersion. Set at liberty those who are in bondage among the heathen. There were some of us who were already in slavery. Look upon those who are despised and abhorred, and let the heathen know that you are our God. Torment those who oppress us, and in arrogancy shamefully entreat us. Plant your people in your holy place, even as Moses said. Notice this is not a prayer about we're just going to turn the other cheek. They're praying and saying, Tatanzambe, intercede and deal with our oppressors. We got to change the language of our prayers, people. This is how we should be praying against our enemies. The time for turning the other cheek is over. Going on. As soon as the sacrifice was consumed, Nehemiah commanded to pour on great stones the water that was left. And when this was done, a flame was kindled. But when the light from the altar shone near it, it was all consumed. This consuming fire, this flame, we know that is the Most High. Anyway, when the king of Persia found this out, he came and took over this place where this altar was, and he enclosed the place. He made it sacred after he had proved that it was indeed a place where some unexplained flame would come from. I thought this is very similar to all the national parks, or many of the national parks, I should say, that have been used to conceal historically significant places that belong to Isolele. There's national parks, there's churches, there's all kinds of structures that have been built on top of memorials and places of significance for Isolele. Just like the king of Persia was doing, they're doing it today. It didn't start yesterday. And Nehemiah and those who are with him called this thing naphtha, which is by interpretation cleansing, but most men call it neptai. Naphtha is a feedstock used in production of many chemicals. It's a feedstock that looks like paraffin or petroleum-based energy. That's where they got this word naphtha. All right, let's move on and see something else. In the second chapter, it says that Jeremiah the prophet commanded those who were carried away to take of the fire, as has been signified or discussed above. So the same fire that had been hidden by the priest, and then Nehemiah requested them to find it, Jeremiah later on and comes and makes sure that they carry away that fire, you know. And he also tells people that they should not forget the statutes of the Most High. They should not depart from the law, you know. Let's read this. I'm going to read this whole piece here because we have been given some clues about where the Ark of the Covenant is. It says, and it was contained in the writing that the prophet, being warned of God, commanded that the tabernacle and the ark should follow with him when he went forth into the mountain where Moses went up and saw the heritage of God. Either this is the mountain where Moses went and met the Most High, which is Mount Sinai, or it's referring to the mountain where Moses went up and saw the promised land, but he didn't go into it, which is Mount Nebo. And Jeremiah came and found a chamber in the rock, and there he brought in the tabernacle and the ark and the altar of incense, and he made fast the door. He closed it. And some of those that followed with him came there that they might mark the way and could not find it. But when Jeremiah perceived it, he blamed them, saying, yes, and the place shall be unknown until the Most High gathers the people again together. This is now when the Most High is gathering us together. And then shall the Lord disclose these things. Okay, last one here on these two letters. And in like manner, Judas also gathered together for us all those writings that had been scattered by reason of the war that befell, and they are still with us. So whenever there was invasion of Jerusalem, the invaders targeted our writings. Whatever they did with it, I don't know, but they thought it was important to destroy our history so that we don't know who we are and that we stay in ignorance for as long as can be. Because as long as we don't know who we are, they can dominate us. But anyway, now the Most High, who saved all his people. I thought it was very interesting that it said his people. How you use that information is up to you, but it does say all his people, and restored the heritage to all, and the kingdom, and the priesthood, and the hallowing, even as he promised through the law. In the Most High we hope that he will quickly have mercy upon us and gather us together out of all the earth to the holy place. This is where we will be scattered. Now we'll be gathered to the holy place. Wow. Can't believe we're talking about this when people just came from Angola. Anyway, for he delivered us out of great evils and purified the place. Now the things concerning Judas Maccabees and his relatives or people, kindred, and the manifestations that came from heaven to those that fight with one another in manful deeds for the religion of the Bantus or Isolele, so that being but few, they rescued the whole country and chased the barbarous multitudes. This is talking about what Judas did, Judas Maccabees. But notice that the Most High was assisting, was the one who was giving Judas this victory, you know. It says here, and the manifestations that came from heaven to those that vied with one another. So the Most High was helping our forefathers, and we can expect that he will help us. We just talked about the way the recent hurricane in the US seems to have targeted certain communities. I don't know how to interpret that, but it is not happenstance for sure. Anyway, they recovered again the temple, renowned all over the world, and freed the city and restored the laws. All right, so that's the first two letters. I'll try and go through this maybe in about 10 minutes. Let's talk about this martyrdom. So here we're going to listen to those 42 verses. And I want you to pay attention to whatever you can pick out from those 42 verses. And then I'll quickly present some of the things that I picked out. So Let's go.
It came to pass also that 7 brethren with their mother were taken, and compelled by the king against the law to taste swine's flesh, and were tormented with scourges and whips. But one of them that spake first said thus, What wouldest thou ask or learn of us? We are ready to die, rather than to transgress the laws of our fathers. Then the king, being in a rage, commanded pans and cauldrons to be made hot, which forthwith being heated, he commanded to cut out the tongue of him that spake first, and to cut off the utmost parts of his body, the rest of his brethren and his mother looking on. Now when he was thus maimed in all his members, he commanded him, being yet alive, to be brought to the fire, and to be fried in the pan. And as the vapor of the pan was for a good space dispersed, they exhorted one another with the mother to die manfully, saying thus, The Lord God looketh upon us, and in truth hath comfort in us, as Moses in his song, which witnessed to their faces declared, saying, And he shall be comforted in his servants. So when the first was dead after this manner, they brought the second to make him a mocking stock. And when they had pulled off the skin of his head with the hair, they asked him, Wilt thou eat before thou be punished throughout every member of thy body? But he answered in his own language and said, No. Wherefore he also received the next torment in order, as the former did. And when he was at the last gasp, he said, Thou like a fury takest us out of this present life, but the King of the world shall raise us up, who have died for his laws unto everlasting life. After him was the third made a mocking stock, and when he was required, he put out his tongue, and that right soon, holding forth his hands manfully, and said courageously, These I had from heaven, and for his laws I despised them, and from him I hope to receive them again. Insomuch that the king and they that were with him marveled at the young man's courage, for that he nothing regarded the pains. Now when this man was dead also, they tormented and mangled the fourth in like manner. So when he was ready to die, he said thus, It is good being put to death by men, to look for hope from God to be raised up again by him. As for thee, thou shalt have no resurrection to life. Afterward they brought the fifth also, and mangled him. Then looked he unto the king and said, Thou hast power over men, thou art corruptible, thou doest what thou wilt. Yet think not that our nation is forsaken of God, but abide a while, and behold his great power, how he will torment thee and thy seed. After him also they brought the sixth, who being ready to die said, Be not deceived without cause, for we suffer these things for ourselves, having sinned against our God. Therefore marvelous things are done unto us. But think not thou, that takest in hand to strive against God, that thou shalt escape unpunished. But the mother was marvelous above all, and worthy of honorable memory. For when she saw her 7 sons slain within the space of one day, she bare it with a good courage, because of the hope that she had in the Lord. Yea, she exhorted every one of them in her own language, filled with courageous spirits, and stirring up her womanish thoughts with a manly stomach, she said unto them, I cannot tell how ye came into my womb, for I neither gave you breath nor life, neither was it I that formed the members of every one of you, but doubtless the Creator of the world, who formed the generation of man, and found out the beginning of all things, will also of his own mercy give you breath and life again, as ye now regard not your own selves for his law's sake. Now Antiochus, thinking himself despised, and suspecting it to be a reproachful speech, whilst the youngest was yet alive, did not only exhort him by words, but also assured him with oaths, that he would make him both a rich and a happy man, if he would turn from the laws of his fathers, and that also he would take him for his friend, and trust him with affairs. But when the young man would in no case hearken unto him, the king called his mother, and exhorted her that she would counsel the young man to save his life. And when he had exhorted her with many words, she promised him that she would counsel her son. But she, bowing herself toward him, laughing the cruel tyrant to scorn, spake in her country language on this manner, O my son, have pity upon me, that bare thee 9 months in my womb, and gave thee suck 3 years, and nourished thee, and brought thee up unto this age, and endured the troubles of education. I beseech thee, my son, look upon the heaven and the earth, and all that is therein, and consider that God made them of things that were not, and so was mankind made likewise. Fear not this tormentor, but being worthy of thy brethren, take thy death, that I may receive thee again in mercy with thy brethren. While she was yet speaking these words, the young man said, Whom wait ye for? I will not obey the king's commandment, but I will obey the commandment of the law that was given unto our fathers by Moses. And thou that hast been the author of all mischief against the Hebrews, shalt not escape the hands of God, for we suffer because of our sins. And though the living Lord be angry with us a little while for our chastening and correction, yet shall he be at one again with his servants. But thou, O godless man, and of all other most wicked, be not lifted up without a cause, nor puffed up with uncertain hopes, lifting up thy hand against the servants of God. For thou hast not yet escaped the judgment of Almighty God, who seeth all things. For our brethren, who now have suffered a short pain, are dead under God's covenant of everlasting life. But thou, through the judgment of God, shalt receive just punishment for thy pride. But I, as my brethren, offer up my body and life for the laws of our fathers, beseeching God that he would speedily be merciful unto our nation, and that thou by torments and plagues mayest confess that he alone is God, and that in me and my brethren the wrath of the Almighty, which is justly brought upon all our nation, may cease. Then the king, being in a rage, handled him worse than all the rest, and took it grievously that he was mocked. So this man died undefiled and put his whole trust in the Lord. Last of all, after the sons, the mother died. Let this be enough now to have spoken concerning the idolatrous feasts and the extreme tortures.
All right. So we just listened to what happened to that mother and the 7 sons. I will really quickly give you a summary here with some cliff notes. So they were being compelled to eat pig, which was against their beliefs. And the first son, upon being killed, these were his last words to the king. What would you ask and learn of us? For we are ready to die rather than transgress the laws of our fathers. And the rest of them, together with their mother, encouraged themselves by saying, Tetanzambe sees and in truth is entreated for us, as Moses declared in his song, which witnesses against the people to their faces, saying, and he shall be entreated for his servants. The second son, upon being killed, these were his last words. First of all, he answered in the language of his fathers and said to them, I noticed it said language of his fathers. It didn't say Hebrew. They were speaking Bantu languages. That is what they're referring to here. But he said, you miscreant, that's what he called the king, do release us. You're releasing us out of this present life. You're killing us. But the king of the world shall raise us up, who have died for his laws, to an eternal renewal of life. The third son, his last words, from heaven I possess these, and for his law's sake I condemn these, and from him I hope to receive these back again. These guys were valiant. The fourth son, it is good to die at the hands of men and look for the hopes which are given by the Most High, that we shall be raised up again by him. For as for you, you shall have no resurrection to life. Wow. These guys were bold. Fifth son, because you have authority among men, though you are yourself corruptible, you do what you will, yet think not that our race has been forsaken by God, forsaken of God, but hold you on your way, and behold his sovereign majesty, how it will torture you and your seed. These guys are cussing out the king and his posterity, even at the point of their death. Very bold. The sixth son, be not vainly deceived, for we suffer these things for our own doings, as sinning against our own God. Marvelous things are come to pass, but think not you that you shall be unpunished, having essayed to fight against the Most High. He's telling him, we know we are suffering this because we disobeyed the Most High. But make no mistake, the Most High is also going to deal with you, for doing all these things you're doing to us. Then let's see what it says here about the mother. Above all was the mother, marvelous and worthy of honorable memory. And she exhorted each one of them in the language of their fathers. Again, their native languages. I read this part from the mother. I know not how you came into my womb, neither was it I that bestowed on you your spirit and your life. She's acknowledging the Most High. And it was not I that brought you into order, the first elements of each one of you. Therefore, the creator of the world, who fashioned the generation of man and devised the generation of all things in mercy, gives back to you again both your spirit and your life, as you now condemn your own selves for his law's sake. She goes on to say, my son, have pity upon me. She's talking to the last born son, the seventh one at least. Have pity upon me that carried you 9 months in my womb, and gave you suck 3 years, and nourished and brought you up to this age, and sustained you. I beseech you, my child, to lift your eyes to the heaven and the earth, and to see all things that are therein, and thus to recognize that the Most High made them not of things that were, and that the race of men in this wise comes into being. Don't be afraid of this butcher. This is the king. But proving yourself worthy of your kindred, your fellow Bantu, accept your death, that in the mercy of the Most High, I may receive you again with your kindred. What had just happened here was that the king had tried to bribe this son and tell him, I'll give you this, I'll give you that, I'll make you into this position of power, and so on and so forth. And the king had pleaded with the mom and told the mom to talk to the son. And the mom said, okay, I'll talk to my son. But this is what she told her son. And before she had even completed speaking, the young man, the seventh son, said, what are you waiting for? I obey not the commandment of the king, but I listen to the commandment of the law that was given to our fathers through Moses. Now, this son delivers the longest speech and the most harsh speech to the king. But you that have devised all manner of evil against the Hebrews shall in no wise escape the hands of God, for we are suffering because of our own sins. And if for rebuke and chastening our living Lord has been angered a little while, yet shall he again be reconciled with his own servants. But you, unholy man, and of all most vile, be not vainly lifted up in your wild pride with uncertain hopes, raising your hand against the heavenly children. For not yet have you escaped the judgment of the Almighty Tetanzambi, that sees all things. For these our kindred have endured a short pain that brings everlasting life, have now died under the Most High's covenant. But you, through the judgment of the Most High, shall receive in just measure the penalties of your arrogancy. But I, as my kindred, give up both body and soul for the laws of our fathers, calling upon Tatanzambi that he may speedily become gracious to the nation, single nation of Isolili, and that you amidst trials and plagues may confess that he alone is Tatanzambi, or the Most High, and that in me and my kindred you may stay the wrath of the Almighty, which has been justly brought upon our whole race. And then after that, the mother also died. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you find this content helpful.